All rise. The International Criminal Court is now in session. L'Audience Corporate International, 8 avert.
On Tuesday, 6th December 2016, the trial in the case of the prosecutor versus Dominic Ongwen opened before Trial Chamber 9 at the International Criminal Court in The Hague, in the Netherlands.
The situation in Uganda in the case of the prosecutor versus Dominic Ongwen. Case reference ICC 0204-0115. We are in open session.
For the members of the public and also for the parties and participants, since not everybody may know us yet, my name is Bertram Schmidt. I'm the presiding judge of this chamber. To my right is Judge Peter Kovac, and to my left, Judge Raul Pangalangan. I would ask counsel to introduce themselves for the record.
The trial's opening started with the reading of the charges against Mr. Ongwen.
Count 1. Attacks against the civilian population as such as a war crime on or about 10 October 2003 at or near Pajule IDP camp.
Dominic Ongwen, alleged brigade commander of the Senior Brigade of the Lord's Resistance Army, LRA, is accused of 70 counts of war crimes and crimes against humanity, allegedly committed during attacks against the civilian population in Lukodi, Pajule, Odek, and Abok IDP camps between October 2003 and June 2004. Further, the prosecution alleges that from at least 1st July 2002 until 31st December 2005, Dominic Ongwen, Joseph Konyi, and other senior brigade commanders were part of a common plan to abduct women and girls in northern Uganda that were then used as forced wives and sex slaves, tortured, raped, and made to serve as domestic help, and to conscript in the use of children under the age of 15 to participate actively in hostilities. The chamber was satisfied that the accused understood the nature of the charges.
Do you make an admission of guilt with respect to any charge?
In the name of God, I deny all these charges in respect to the war in northern Uganda.
And the second question, you therefore plead not guilty with respect to all the charges, I assume.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. You may sit down, please.
The court's prosecutor, Fatou Bensouda, and senior trial lawyer, Benjamin Gumpert, took the floor for opening statements.
This trial is about violence and misery that blighted the lives of millions of people living in northern Uganda. Ordinary citizens, civilians, who wanted no more than to be allowed to live their lives in peace, could no longer live in the villages in which they had been born and raised. Violent attacks on civilian targets by an armed group calling itself the Lord's Resistance Army, or LRA, had resulted in those ordinary people being forced into camps for internally displaced persons, IDPs, and often reduced to dependency on international food aid. These camps were themselves subject to regular and terrifying attacks. The evidence in this case will establish that Dominic Ongwen was directly involved in many of these attacks by the LRA on civilians in northern Uganda. Part of the case, which the prosecution alleges against him, is that he knew that the crimes he committed at Pajule, Odek, Lukodi, and Abak were part of the widespread and systematic attack. In order to sustain the fighting strength of the LRA, children were kidnapped and recruited to become child soldiers. One prosecution witness, who was himself abducted by the LRA, estimates that the majority of soldiers in Dominic Ongwen's group in 2003 to 2004 were children younger than 18, and 70% to 80% of those between 13 and 15 years old. The LRA was implementing a policy of abducting young girls for sex. These forced wives were given no choice. They were treated as spoils of war, awarded as prizes, without any more say in the matter than if they had been animals or inanimate objects. When they hesitated or refused to accept the sexual advances of the man whom they had been allotted, they were savagely and repeatedly beaten. If they were suspected of trying to escape, they would be caned or murdered. They were held for months, and in many cases, they were held for years in sexual slavery and domestic slavery, and were subjected to repeated rape. Many of them became pregnant without any choice in the matter, and some gave birth to numerous children who were themselves then ingested into the ranks of the LRA. But having suffered victimization in the past is not a justification or an excuse to victimize others. Each human being must be taken to be endowed with moral responsibility for their actions. And the focus of the ICC criminal process is not on the goodness or the badness of the accused person, but on the criminal acts which he or she has committed. We are not here to deny that he was a victim in his youth. We will prove what he did, what he said, and the impacts of those deeds on the many victims. This court will not decide his goodness or badness, nor whether he deserves sympathy, but whether he is guilty of these crimes committed as an adult with which he stands charged.
The hearings continued on Wednesday, 7th December, with the opening statements of the legal representatives of the 4,107 victims participating in the case. Joseph Akwenyu Manoba and Francisco Cox, representing a first group of victims, and Paulina Masida and Jen Adong, representing a second group.
Victims of the attack generally recall their experience as follows, and I quote, Your Honors, from one of our clients. I quote, all around, there were killings going on, and so much fire burning that the entire place became so bright as it was broad daylight. By the time they left, the whole camp was littered with dead bodies, as if they had been on a hunting spree. They killed people as if they were hunting animals. After completing their operations, usually the rebels departed, taking with them an unspecified number of men, women, children, foodstuff, and other valuables. An estimated 30,000 children, mainly from the Acholi sub-region, have been abducted and conscripted as child soldiers and rebel wives. During the decades of armed conflict in northern Uganda, the LRA systematically abducted girls for the purpose of forcibly marrying them to commanders and fighters. Abductions were normally perpetrated during the attacks. Why? Victims wish to participate at trial. Which are their expectations at the start of the trial?
Our clients inform this court that the LRA armed and violent attacks at Lukodi, at Odek, at Abok, forever changed life and the way of life of all camp residents, their relatives, and the events shocked humanity at large in a way that is hitherto unknown in the said local communities. The attacks were swift and exceedingly brutal. In the span of 2 to 3 hours, victims in the protected camps were further displaced, rendered homeless and deprived of food rations and livelihoods, dignity, and were bereaved as well. Family members were abducted. In short, the devastation was absolute. Victims are haunted by the memories of death and destruction that included the sight of numerous dead bodies, often with relatives and friends among them. Some victims watched helplessly as their family members were indiscriminately murdered. Others who fled for their lives only returned to the site of their dead relatives, shot or bludgeoned or burned in their houses. Many cannot forget the disturbing scenes of domestic animals eating human flesh. Others relive the horrific incidents from the day of the violent attacks, especially outrages and the inhuman treatment subjected to many of the camp residents.
The victims, therefore, ask for justice. In the words of another client of ours, if we kill Dominic Ongwen, is that going to pay for our people who died? I think not. Is it going to stop others from killing? I think the answer is also no. It is only when it's put on legal process and everybody's aware of what happened to him that he becomes an example. That is what we want. It is moving to see how many thousands of people from Abok, from Lukodi, have come to see the opening of this trial. This shows that international justice, though may seem a very abstract concept, a very far away concept, a trial that is being held at The Hague in this modern facility, is done and must be done for those who suffered the consequences of the crimes.
At its request, the defense team, led by counsel Crispus Ayena Odongo, will make its opening statements at the beginning of the presentation of its evidence once the prosecution has concluded the presentation of its case. The trial will resume on 16th January 2017, when the prosecution will begin to present its evidence and call its witnesses before the judges. The opening of the trial was broadcast live in 6 locations within northern Uganda: Abok, Odek, Lukodi, Pajule, Korom, and Gulu town, and 2 locations in Kampala. Registrar of the court, Herman von Hebel, participated in the outreach activities. Addressing victims' community in Abok, ICC registrar said,
I'm here today now to bear witness to a special day for the victims in northern Uganda. It's a moment that they have been waiting for many years and hoping for as well. The victims are present in the courtroom in The Hague through their legal representatives, and the court and I am here present in the field with the victims.